Well, one of the foundations of wildlife management is an understanding of factors that may limit a particular population. And once we understand what those factors are, we can then attempt to manipulate them to cause a desired change in a population. Here in the western Upper Peninsula, the deer population since the mid-1990s has reduced to a level that represents the 50-year average. And I think most folks are familiar with the hard winters that we had in 1995, 96, and 96, 97. And since that time, the western UP deer herd has really not rebounded as we expected it might. And so the fundamental question is, why not? And so the purpose of this study is to try to look at several different factors that may be associated with that population not increasing as we expected it could have. So what we want to focus on in this study is the role of predation, winter weather, and habitat on fawn survival. Now, white-tailed deer are a very important species in the state, and that's obviously very true here in the Upper Peninsula. Deer have a lot of values. They're important ecologically, they're important socially, they're important culturally, they're important economically. And factors that can limit deer populations include predation, weather, especially winter weather, habitat, food conditions, disease, and of course, hunter-harvest can affect deer abundance. What we're going to do is we're going to study fawn survival, and in order to study fawn survival, we have to capture fawns when they're only a couple days old and radio collar them so we can monitor not only their survival rate but also try and determine what kills them. Catching fawns and collaring them in a forested environment like we have here down in Menominee and Delta counties is a relatively difficult thing to do to be able to get a large enough sample size. So what we're doing this winter is we're trapping adult does. We're ultrasounding those does to determine if they're pregnant. And if they're pregnant, we fit them with an internal transmitter that gets expelled when the doe gives birth, and that keys us into where this fawn is located. What we've started to do this winter is to trap deer in clover traps, which are essentially a netted box trap. So the sides and top of the nets are made out of mesh. When we have a deer in the trap is collapsible, so you actually collapse the trap on the deer and it kind of pins it to the ground.
It looks bad. Hey, I'm going right between your legs. Okay? Let me know, I'll get the time. Okay.
We then chemically immobilize that deer, and once it's induced, we pull the deer out of the trap, and we immediately begin monitoring temperature, pulse, and respiration to ensure the health of that animal. And then we begin to collect biological samples. So we draw blood, we're extracting urine from the animal because it helps us understand the stress level of these deer.
$13, $12,
I know it's
7,
all the way. It's hard to
5. Got it?
Yep. Pull the legs.
We then ultrasound the doe to determine whether or not she's pregnant. If she's pregnant, we insert a small transmitter into the birth canal, and that stays in there until the fawn is born.
Rock her up, that kind of, you got it. Let me just let it relax just a touch.
22.7.
And when the fawn is born, that transmitter gets pushed out. It changes the signal of that transmitter so we know that the fawn has been born, and that keys us into where that animal is. Then we'll go in the spring once that transmitter triggers, and we'll try to capture those fawns and get them collared. Now the does are also radio collared, so we can track the does throughout the spring, summer, fall, and winter and find out their movements. We're also going to come at this from the other end, come at it from the end of predators, and we're going to try to answer what it appears to be a pretty simple question that hasn't been answered before, is how many fawns does a black bear kill during the summertime? How many fawns does a coyote kill on average? How many fawns does a wolf or a bobcat kill on average? And in order to do that, we're going to fit these predators with global positioning system collars. These collars are set up so that they actually gather locations very frequently, every 15 to 20 minutes. And they're also set up in a way that we can download that information remotely. And so what we'll do is we'll get these collars on the animals, we'll download the data, and we'll look for clusters of locations which would indicate that the predator has spent a significant amount of time in a particular spot. We'll then go in and search those clusters and try and identify kill sites. And we piloted this technique a few years on wolves, and it seemed to work pretty well. And so we're going to apply it in this study.